This is Mr. Palumba, and this is the next part of your United States History 1 First Project. At the end of this video, you'll be asked to write a short one-page response in a separate Google Doc. You'll submit that to complete this part of the project. This presentation is titled On Columbus Day from the Oatmeal.com. October 12th is Columbus Day in the United States of America. When asked to describe Christopher Columbus, most people generally say two things. First, he was a brave explorer who, despite terrible odds, sailed across the Atlantic and proved that the earth was round. Second, he was a tireless, courageous hero who discovered the New World. These are the ideas that comprise Columbus's legacy. I am here to dispel those ideas and, with as much candor as I can muster, introduce a few of my own. In 1491, no one thought the earth was flat. The notion that in pre-Columbian times everyone thought the earth was flat is a myth conjured up in the 18th century. Misguided historians started parroting other misguided historians, which trickled down to school teachers, and the idea stuck. Columbus knew the earth was round. The Queen of Spain knew the earth was round. And pretty much anyone with an education knew the earth was round. The ancient Greeks had proven it 2,000 years before Columbus was even born. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered a new world. Glossing over the fact that the natives living in the New World got there 14,000 years before Columbus discovered it, Leif Erikson technically found the New World 500 years before Columbus ever set sail. Although Columbus's arrival did mark the beginning of a new era, semantically speaking, he didn't discover the Americas. I am not here to argue semantics, however. I am here to argue for Columbus's true legacy. A legacy that I believe can be defined by detailing what transpired between Columbus and Lucayan natives who occupied what is currently known as the Bahamas. In 1493, Columbus's initial voyage to the New World was revelatory, but not particularly fruitful. Columbus knew he'd stumbled onto something big, but he remained myopically focused on gold rather than the discovery of a new landmass. This myopia was partially fueled by the natives themselves, for they wore gold jewelry that Columbus immediately took note of in his journal, and the source of that gold became his primary objective from then out. A better trade route to Asia be damned, Columbus wanted cheddar. This set the precedent for the remainder of Columbus's interactions with the native peoples. On the 1492 voyage, Columbus described them as healthy, generous, hospitable people. When the Santa Maria was shipwrecked, the Lucayan natives worked for hours to rescue the ship, saving the crew and cargo. When Columbus returned home, he took 25 Lucayan natives with him. Of those 25, 7 survived the voyage. Where there was kindness in the natives, Columbus saw weakness, and he concluded his 1492 journal entry with this: "I could conquer the whole of them with 50 men, and govern them as I pleased." Upon returning to Spain, Columbus sold the Queen on the idea of a new world saturated in wealth and prosperity beyond her wildest dreams. She in turn outfitted him with 17 ships, 1,500 men, and an arsenal of swords, crossbows, and cannons. So Columbus returned to the New World, this time armed to the teeth. Upon his arrival, he demanded that the Lucayan people give his men food and gold, and allow them to have sex with their women. When the Lucayans refused, Columbus responded by ordering that their ears and noses be cut off, so that the now disfigured offenders could return to their villages and serve as a warning to others. Eventually, the natives rebelled. Columbus saw this as a perfect excuse to go to war, and with heavily armed troops and advanced weaponry, it wound up being a very short war. The natives were quickly slaughtered, having only spears, rocks, and other primitive tools to fight with. There are eyewitness accounts of fallen Lucayan warriors being fed to hunting dogs while they were still alive, screaming and wailing in agony as the dogs feasted on their limbs and entrails. Despite quelling the rebellion, Columbus still didn't have the gold he wanted. Not wanting to return home empty-handed, Columbus rounded up 500 Lucayan natives, chained them below the decks of his ships, and returned them to Spain so they could be sold as slaves. Of those, 300 survived the voyage. Another 500 natives were enslaved and kept in the New World. They were forced to feed, care for, and even carry Columbus's men around on their backs. This resulted in many Lucayans fleeing into the mountains to escape enslavement. Columbus's men took to hunting these refugees down for sport, and after murdering them, used their bodies as dog food. Despite all these awful shenanigans, Columbus still didn't have enough gold, so he set up a tribute system whereby natives who brought him gold would receive a token to wear around their necks. This token gave them a sort of get-out-of-jail-free card for a few months, so they wouldn't be required to produce gold until the token expired. Any native without a token who was caught not meeting their gold quota was punished. The punishment, instead of wearing a token around their neck, Columbus's men would cut off the natives' hands and force them to wear those instead. Awful? Yes. It worked, though, and by using this tribute system, Columbus finally got his cheddar. His greed mildly satiated, Columbus began rewarding his lieutenants with sex slaves, particularly young girls who had been forced into sexual slavery. In a letter to a friend, Columbus remarked upon how girls between the ages of 9 and 10 could be used as currency. 100 castellanos are as easily obtained for a woman as for a farm, and it is very general, and there are plenty of dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand. Christopher Columbus, 1500. And, in addition to smallpox and other diseases which wiped out huge segments of the native population, the sudden influx of forced labor in the New World resulted in a mass imbalance in the ecology and workforce of the natives' peoples. It's estimated that over the next 50 years, the final death toll from post-Columbian disease and starvation was in the range of 3 to 5 million people. Columbus's gold exports also resulted in the paralysis of the gold economy of the Gold Coast of Africa. This led to the rise of African slaves as the dominant commodity in that region, which inadvertently makes Columbus the father of the transatlantic slave trade. The point I'm trying to drive home is this. Christopher Columbus was awful. He discovered the New World much like a meteorite discovered the dinosaurs. And good old Chris Columbus, sex slaver, mass murderer, and champion of sociopathic imperialism, has his own federal holiday. This is an honor shared by Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. I repeat, the father of the transatlantic slave trade is honored on the same level as Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. But Columbus Day is an American tradition, some ignorant white man from Bumwretch, Oklahoma. Columbus Day was established in the 1930s by a male-only Catholic organization known as the Knights of Columbus. They wanted a male, Catholic role model their kids could look up to, so they pressured Roosevelt into making it a federal holiday. Columbus Day is not an American tradition. It's a recent mistake. Bartolome. If you look at anyone closely enough, you'll always find dirt. In the case of Columbus, I did not simply find dirt. I found a soiled, wretched horror show of a human being. That being said, it's incredibly easy to defile a historical figure. I find it much harder and much more rewarding to deify one. History is full of terrible people and terrible things. So instead of casting a shadow where there is already darkness, I'd much prefer to cast a light. And I'd like to conclude this essay by casting that light on Bartolome de las Casas, Bartolome de las Casas started out a lot like Columbus. He was a wealthy adventurer who traveled to the New World, where he owned a large plantation with many slaves. Unlike Columbus, however, de las Casas underwent a radical transformation in his life. After witnessing the violent atrocities committed against the natives, he gave up his land, freed his slaves, became a priest, and spent the rest of his life fighting the brutal colonization of the New World. The only way he could make peace with the horrors he witnessed was to try and help as many people as possible. His stand against the cruelty and imperialism of the Spanish crown eventually earned him the title Defender of the Indians. And Bartolome de las Casas spent the next 50 years fighting for their equality. He is considered to be one of the first advocates for universal human rights. Like most people, I don't really celebrate Columbus Day. I regard it like most other federal holidays, with a kind of hazy, lukewarm indifference. This year, however, I intend to celebrate it, but not in honor of Christopher Columbus. I intend to honor Bartolome de las Casas and proclaim Columbus Day to hereby be known as Bartolome Day. I realize Bartolome is his first name, but Bartolome Day rolls off the tongue quite nicely. Because when I consider Bartolome de las Casas, both the things he did and the person he was, I think now this is a man whom children should learn about in school. Christopher Columbus left his home and found a new world. Bartolome de las Casas left his home and found his humanity. And so, in the name of those who cast light where there is darkness, and in the name of those who are seeking, finding, or simply remembering their humanity, I say to you, my dear reader, Happy Bartolome Day. Now that you've read and listened to this short essay from theoatmeal.com, I'd like for you to take a minute and consider whether or not we should continue to celebrate Columbus Day in this country. I have included a Google Doc attached to this file with a prompt, and I want you to write a one-page prompt citing evidence from this video and at least one outside source, and create an argument where you either say we should continue to celebrate Christopher Columbus's day or we should not celebrate Columbus Day anymore. It's very similar to the questions that I've asked you previously, but this time I'm asking you to write a little bit longer of a response and to cite something from this video and one outside article.